Okay, so we'll continue with the uh, mass hysteria that we were discussing on the other day. So the one of the ancient example that I could recall was in 14th century, that was known as dancing mania. Okay, so dancing hysteria, when people in Europe in 14th century started dancing, and there were multiple episodes of this hysteria in different locations, and possible origin. In fact, the origin of most of these hysteria, uh, or generally the common denominator, is anxiety, some kind of anxiety. There was poverty in Europe in that period, in 14th century, anxiety and the herd mentality. Okay, so this was in sometime in 1500, and the latest most example that I could recall which came in the news was COVID-19, not the pandemic. Uh, in Ukraine, there was a news when it was in epidemic stage in China. There was a rumor that the quarantine people in Wuhan, some of them have escaped and came to Ukraine, and they are spreading the COVID-19 aggressively in Ukraine, and this led to violence. Okay, great deal of violence in Ukraine. It was termed as mass hysteria because there was no such incident. Yeah, and then there are a number of examples which have happened in India. So one of those example is uh, have you heard of, if I recall, a recent movie? Some of you would have seen, or maybe all of you would have seen the movie Istri by Rajkumar Rao, right? Now, in this movie, there is a mythical character, a witch, which is knocking the door and so on. And this is based on a real incident which happened in Bangalore. So, in Bangalore in 70s and 80s. So this happened in 2020, 70s and 80s. Now, people were putting this board on their door, a notice, come tomorrow, right? That is known as Naleba, which means come tomorrow. Now, the reason that why did they put Naleba, why not don't come, uh, so never come. So they wrote come tomorrow because it looks nicer rather than saying that get lost. When a guest come to you or a beggar come to your house, you say bhaiya kal aana, come tomorrow. It looks a bit generous. So they used to put this notice board outside their house that they used to write on their board. And even today, if you go to Bangalore in that locality, this is not the urban Bangalore, which is IT hub. This is the urban rural areas, small towns around Bangalore. And even today, you can see that people have written. You can still see Naleba on their board. And a story, more or less, most of you know if you have seen this movie. And that's a very good example of mass hysteria. Apart from it, there was Monkey Man, Monkey Man hysteria in early 2000, maybe it was in 2001. And there is a movie on this hysteria known as Delhi 6. It's not entirely on the hysteria, but it is based on somewhat similar incidents. And this is played by Abhishek Bachchan in Delhi 6. And one of the crazy hysteria that I have seen in India when I was 10-year-old was Ganesha drinking milk. In 2005. Now this went to really a mass level across India. Now I'll show you some of for some of these some documentary evidences out there, some videos. I'll just show you those videos in a while. Now this is for the monkey man hysteria. Can you hear it? No. I just give me a minute. Somehow speakers are not working. Yeah, it's working now.
उसमें लेट गया तो ये बच्चा 4 के बीच में लेटा एक साथ इतने सारे लोगों को किया एक ही जगह पे, क्या समझ में नहीं आया कोई बात। छोटा सा घर बना है, एक छोटा बना छोटा नहीं, हमने देखा नहीं उसकी, उसे अंदाजा क्या करा, जब दिखाई नहीं पड़ रहा तो जमीन से तो नीचे रहा है, इतना छोटा है वो अंधेरे में शिकार करता है और समझ लीजिए इतना खाता है। बहुत खतरनाक हुआ, सब डर रहे हैं, वैसे बहुत ज्यादा है, सब डर रहे हैं, क्या मालूम किस वक्त आ जाए, 2 दिन से सब लोग जाग रहे हैं।
जिससे कि उनके साथ 2-2 पुलिस वाले और पब्लिक के खुद आदमी एक टीम बना के वो पूरे मोहल्ले में घूम रही है, लेकिन कहीं कोई इस तरह की कोई चीज सामने नहीं आई है कि कोई आदमी है या जैसे कह रहे हैं काला बंदर है, कोई इस तरह की चीज सामने नहीं आई।
यहाँ थोड़ा ही देगा अपने के पीछे कोई और चेकिंग करेंगे आप काट करके उसको निकल जाएगा।
अब ये बताइए मैं उसको क्या मान सकता हूँ? इधर का बंदर कहते इधर आदमी, तो मैं उसको क्या मान लीजिए बंदर भी होता कूद कर जाता, ये तो है ना, कूद कर जाता, फिर वो कुछ दूर में पेड़ पर जाता तो बढ़ जाता, और आदमी होता तो सारा दौड़ के भागता, इतना न पाता तो होने जाता है और न पाता हो जा रहा है, उसको मैं क्या मान?
के साथ सामने हुआ नहीं है।
Right. We now show you a video. Hello. Hello. Am I audible? Yeah. So
Yes, sir,
I'm
you are audible.
going to play the other video, which is the milk miracle, where the Ganesha and other idols started drinking milk in the year 2005. Now, I want little patience from you people, because don't take it as a religious matter or as my communal belief. This has nothing to do with your or mine belief. And I'm not trying to provoke anything. This is a very good example of mass hysteria. And if you are a rational individual, you will appreciate it.
Crowds mobbed temples all over India to see Ganesh, the elephant god credited with bringing prosperity, drinking milk. As people throughout the nation declared it a miracle, others cashed in, charging 5 times the normal price for milk.
जिस दिन भगवान गणपति ने दूध पिया उस दिन ऐसे लग रहा था जैसे कोई विशेष दिवाली का या होली का त्योहार सा हो। पूरे उससे भी ज्यादा उमंग और लहर दौड़ी हुई थी, बड़े खुश हो रहे थे, चारों तरफ एक दूसरे को सूचना दे रहे थे कि हाँ जी आपको पता है, जो पिला भी आए वो दूसरे को कह रहे हैं, दूसरा उसको कह रहा है। तो दिन भर ऐसा मेला लगा रहा जैसे शायद त्योहार वाले दिन भी इतना मेला नहीं होता। हिंदुओं के लिए इतना महत्वपूर्ण दिन है कि जिसका कोई वर्णन नहीं किया जा सकता। 12 बजे के बाद और 2 बजे से पहले हम जब भी हमको नींद आई उसी समय बहुत भगवान की पूजा में लीन रहने वाले और भगवान से बात करने वाले एक हमारे पड़ोसी भक्त थे, बहुत तल्लीन होकर भगवान की सेवा करते थे। उन्होंने हमको जगाया गेट खटखटा के कि पंडित जी उठो उठो और देखो गणपत भगवान दूध पी रहे। तो मैं एकदम से हड़बड़ा के, नींद आई थी तो एकदम उठा, उठ करके मैंने कहा कि गणेश जी दूध पी रहे, मंदिर तो बंद है, गणेश जी कहाँ से दूध पी रहे? मैं नहीं, दूध पी रहे हैं आप, मंदिर तो खोलो। मैंने उठ करके, और दूध होगा आपके पास? मैं दूध तो जरूर होगा भगवान की कृपा से। तो थोड़ा सा कटोरी में दूध डाला, एक चम्मच ली, मंदिर के पट खोले, खोलने के बाद भगवान गणपति के दरबार में हम पहुंच गए। जाकर के हमने कौली में ये ऐसे हमारे पास कटोरी में हमने थोड़ा जो दूध था वो दूध डाला और चम्मच से दूध लिया, मान के कहाँ पी रहे हैं तो वहां हम पहुंच गए। तो वो इस प्रकार से जैसे ही लगाया हमने तो भगवान गणपति ऐसे चूस रहे जैसे ऐसे करके हम जो है नलकी से फ्रूटी वगैरह पीते हैं, उसी ठीक उसी प्रकार से दूध अंदर, चम्मच हमने हल्का सा ऐसे किया और दूध अंदर गया।
So widespread were the reports of a miracle throughout the world that India's Federal Department of Science and Technology was asked to investigate. They were skeptical and said the molecules of milk were being drawn from the school by the texture of the statues.
लाखों की लोग लाइन लग गई मंदिरों में, अपने में तो लगी। उसके बाद जैसे जैसे सूचना मिली, संदेश मिला, लोगों को समाचार न्यूज मिलते ही कि ऐसा हो रहा है, एक दूसरे को फिर हर मंदिरों में भीड़ लग गई। हमारे यहाँ भी शाम तक लगी रही भीड़, लाइन की लाइन चल रहे हैं लोग, शाम तक दूध ला रहे हैं, फिर थैली की थैली ला रहे हैं, दूधों को जो पिलाते जा रहे हैं, जाते जा रहे हैं। हमारे हिंदू धर्म में 33 करोड़ देवी देवता विराजमान रहते हैं और वो 33 करोड़ देवी देवता भी हमारे सबके शरीर में विराजमान होते हैं, हर जीव के अंदर। ऐसे 33 करोड़ देवी देवताओं में हमारे गणपति भगवान का वही स्थान है जैसे शरीर में प्राण का स्थान।
All right. So, can anybody tell me what was exactly going on? Anyone?
So most likely maybe there's someone behind who is drawing it inwards, or that is what happens in most of these cases.
What was happening? Sorry.
Actually, there is some mechanism on the hind side that draws up the liquid, whatever you offer. So, I mean, there are always these statues or whatever that drink milk or whatever. But
Anybody else?
It was because of the idol structure, I think.
Which structure? Sorry.
Idol structure, Ganesha's idol structure.
Well, this is not the. Okay, so I'll give you this answer is rather simple. Let's not get into the discussion of this topic. That's out of the syllabus. What's happening is this is the capillary action. You can take any idol basically or any object. So, for example, people try to demonstrate this to the board that you take the Mahatma Gandhi statue, and we know that Mahatma Gandhi never used to drink alcohol or anything. So give him some beer through a spoon, and the idol of Mahatma Gandhi will drink beer also. And then you take Jawaharlal Nehru's idol and give something. He used to like coffee. Give him coffee, and he will drink it through a spoon. What's happening is this is a typical capillary action. So you have a certain amount of milk attached to the idle part, and rest of the milk is with you in the spoon, and then the surface tension will suck up a little bit of milk, and then there is this gravity thing. It will go up through surface tension and then go down. So it's not going in the inside the idol. All the milk was actually spilled over in the temples. Okay. Now this went really to a crazy level because I have witnessed this myself. Okay, and because we did the same thing, and I was a kid, so we used to make Ganesha's small idol with the clay. So it's very easy to make Ganesha's idol through clay. It's a very creative thing, and we used to do that. And different kind of things we used to make through clay, and then we try the same thing, and it was happening. But somehow, even a kid can recognize that the milk is actually not going inside the idol; is being spilled over. So we knew that something is just a sipping action. It's just a capillary action that happens, and if you would have done certain small experimental game at home, for example, you have two buckets of water, or one is empty, other is full, and then you put a pipe and suck a little bit of water through pipe, and the water will come from one bucket to another bucket given the height difference. One should be at elevated position. That's the capillary action, simple capillary actions. Now all the rationalists of India, they were asked to debunk this, do something to bust the belief that this indeed is happening. So they came on TV and on the news channels, on multiple news channels, and they tried to explain it. And the very next day, it all stopped. Okay, people got it, and it all stopped. So these are some examples of mass hysteria, where the network properties goes to a crazy level. Okay, now we cannot keep on going looking into these social phenomena. Let's look at
Hello,
few
sir.
more
I
examples
have a
where
doubt.
this is really important to a level that it determines the life and death, right? The social networks. And then we will have maybe a little bit of discussion on molecular networks. Right. So, so I'll take the example of life now, how social networks determines a very important aspect of our life, the lifespan, basically. Okay, so let's look at a very simple network. Okay, just two individuals, and let's say this is one of the tightest bond in social network, and different people may have different definitions of what is the tightest bond in a social network. Somebody will say parents to kids are the tightest bond. Some will say siblings are a very tightest bond. Others will say friendship is even more tighter, and so on. One of the tightest bond is husband-wife, right? So Christakis, who is a physician, he used to take record of all the individuals from his locality who is visiting his clinic, right? So he used to take record, and he noticed something strange, not very strange, something very interesting, in good or bad sense, whatever way you look at it. So what he did was taking all the data of this kind of networks, and then he plotted time on x-axis, because he could track individuals over time, over the, let's say, 20-30 years. And on the y-axis he plotted risk to death. Now don't ask me how did he calculated. I can give you the reference, risk to death, okay, as a population average. And then he plotted it. So now if you plot it, and there are two landmark events over here. One of this is, let's say, somewhere here, you get married, and somewhere here you get widowed. One of the partner has died. Okay. Now first we'll take the example of, let's say, okay, so I'll make a, okay, first we'll take the example of males. Okay, so males, let's say this was some level of happiness, some level of risk to that in the beginning for males. Okay. Now and on an average this is maintained, let's say, to some level. What happens when a guy gets married? Anybody?
It should increase maybe.
Sorry?
It should increase maybe, like he's more happy and joyful, so the chances of getting disease, like maybe like disease gets reduced.
Now, you said this should go high. I'm plotting risk to
Okay, no,
death
no,
on
no.
the.
Yeah, so that should get lower then.
So, in your earlier answer, it would mean that people are committing suicide the day they get
No,
married.
like there are some cases, but not all. So it should go lower.
So it should go down. Okay, that's
Yes.
fine. Okay, so risk to death goes down. Now, my first question, and then it is, let's say, some maintained to some basic level. Okay. Now the question is, the first question is, why does it go down?
They are maybe looking for future prospect, and they are happy in the sense they are not getting any internal diseases like maybe heart problems or mental problems. That is why.
Okay, so you're talking about happiness, general happiness, right?
Yes.
Which may not be the case for all people. So you might be loaded with the responsibilities. So let's say, okay, one aspect is, let's say, emotional happiness. Fine, that's the correct answer. But anything else, more materialistic thing? What, let's say you talk about heart diseases and all that. Now, people are genetically predisposed to those diseases, right? Let's say that I'm talking about more of a healthy population as of now.
Taking better care of their hygiene.
Yeah, one of the aspect. Can you improvise over this? Hygiene, what else?
They are becoming responsible for more people.
Okay, so then the risk to death, I mean, what does it has to do with the risk to death? They take care of themselves more because they are now responsible to take care of the family.
Maybe
Yes.
because
Yes.
Yeah, could be a possible answer. There's a more fundamental thing which is happening, particularly in
some
our
maybe
society, in
maybe
Indian
because
community.
the marriage is giving them the sense of new beginning, so they might there might be a psychological thing, and which gives them the edge.
Yeah, so this is also on similar line. I'm asking about a more fundamental thing, which is changing once you get married. So guys should know better what's happening to your life. Okay.
Income growth.
Sorry?
Income growth.
Oh, no, that doesn't happen when you get married. That happens once you get a job. If you're marrying a rich woman and getting money inappropriately through dowry, that's a different thing. Anybody else? Okay, guys, when you were here in the hostel um, or even at home, when you're having a bachelor life, oh, does it change? Your food habit, does it change?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's one of the fundamental thing. So I can't generalize this in these days because of pandemic. You all are living at home and getting good access to food cooked by your mother or your siblings or by yourself. Uh, what happens in general is that the bachelor life, people move around and they live alone, and they somehow just manage food from hostels and canteens and all that, which is not very healthy thing. Once you get married, you get the home cooked food, and there's someone who is taking care of your health care, not only in terms of food, but uh, other things also. You know, we should eat healthy. The quality of diet is another thing. Um, And then many other things. When you are sick, there are people to take care, and your responsibilities are shared with your family, right? So one of the all the answers that you gave are correct. So I don't argue on that. However, uh, one of the fundamental thing that I think is more important than many of the other emotional well-beings and all that is the healthcare. Okay, so let's say all the answers are correct, and we have a some kind of a weighted sum of all of those factors, which is contributing to decline in the risk to death. Now, let's say in an unfortunate event, this guy gets widowed. Uh, what what happens to the risk to death?
It would increase this time.
Yeah. Okay. Increase to what level? To a level which is prior to the marriage, or less than that, or
Maybe more than that, sir.
More.
yeah. Why?
No one is actually taking care of him now, and he has also suffered trauma. So
Yeah. Yeah. So first of all, you're aging, right? So you're not young anymore because more often this event will happen later in your life. Uh, so what happens is that risk to death increases. It really shoots within the 5 years of this event, right? Now, the reasons are, again, the healthcare is one thing, and now maybe your parents are not alive, or even if they are alive, they are living elsewhere. You were heavily dependent on your spouse. Your parents, your children have moved out for their career or other life prospects, right? So your health will diminish because of the loss of the person who is taking care of your health, right? And of course, emotional trauma. Uh, you are emotionally disturbed by the loss of your tightest bond. And of course, over the time, if you are able to cross 5, 6, 10 years after this event, this may go down a bit. But however, the average, even after several years, remains far higher than what it was prior to marriage. Right? So this is really so within 5 years, it turns out that more often, I don't recall the percentage, what is the percentage increase, but within 5 years, it happens that the males die after the partner has died, after the spouse has died. Now, I have seen these events even in my neighborhood when I was kid. Uh, one of the one of our aunt died in the neighborhood, and then within it was not even within months, within weeks, uh, her husband also died. And it's not only once. We quite often we hear that this happens back to back within few years of time. Other individual is also dying. Okay, so healthcare is compromised. Okay, fine. Let's see what happens in the case of females. Okay, so let's say in the beginning there is some basal level of happiness or risk to death. What happens after a female gets married? Do they also get happier and the risk to death is decreasing, or it doesn't affect them, or does it increase?
Provided the husband takes care of the wife and they form a stronger bond, we can expect that it will reduce.
Okay. Would there be a relative difference?
So I don't think there's a relative difference.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, this is correct. However, there is a relative difference. So female, the risk to death
Sir, in
decreases.
Indian households, it should be a little bit more than males.
Sorry?
In Indian households, especially, that risk to death should be a little bit more for females.
Okay. Why?
Maybe because in Indian households, like women are usually taught that they should be like taking care more about for their spouses and family rather than themselves, and most of the time they don't end up eating well and etc. Like when they get into family.
True. However, this data was not obtained for Indian individuals. This is in the white population, Caucasian population. Uh, I would say that 100 years ago, the situation would be or maybe 100 years behind uh, from, uh, from Europe in terms of gender equality. And so even today in many households in Europe too, or in US too, females are taking care of uh, they're doing the housekeeping stuff. But there will be related difference, of course. Uh, we
So
have
I
a
would
more
have to,
severe problem of gender equality where
so I would have
females
to,
are at, yes.
so I have to add something because the risk of death for women should increase because they have chance of pregnancy. So for with pregnancy, the risk of death should increase, and that should
Okay.
create the difference.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point. But if this study would have been done maybe 70 years ago, maybe the curves would have been different. And this is being done in in white population, Caucasian population, and most of those countries are rich countries, and healthcare is much better than our country. And I think they are also more educated and cautious about having kids. So unlike South Asia, uh, where we had this population problem, uh, and during the time of our grandparents, they used to have 5 to 7 kids, and if one of them died during the uh, during the delivery time or any time after postnatal development, they never used to mind it that much, because if you have 7 8 kids, you are increasing the risk of yourself, risk to death for the woman herself and the kids also. But this study was done in early 2000. Okay, so I think uh, even the policymakers and the healthcare system does not encourage that kind of health hazard. Okay, so if there is a risk to the mother, they go for the C-section, and that does contribute, of course, and maybe because of that, this risk is little bit shallower than males. That I do not deny it, but somehow we do not know why is that so. Maybe women are more stable emotionally, and after marriage, the risk to death doesn't go as drastically down as in case of males. I do agree with what you said, but that may not be the sole reason. Okay, so and then it remains stable over time. And now is the question: what happens when once a woman gets widowed?
So it should be increasing, but less than male. It should be.
Yeah, so precisely for the same reason that either we do not understand the reasons. So again, there is no causality here. We are only making speculation, but the data is important that how this trajectory is changing for male females differently. And so so as somebody pointed out that this will go up, but not really that high as in the case of males. Okay, so you see the overall trajectory for females is rather stable. Now, what is happening at this event for females? Why this risk to death doesn't increases drastically?
you think from an Indian perspective, the emotional support that a male gets from female and what female gets from male are not equal.
True. So when we are discussing the possible reasons, we should consider the network prospect, network angle, right? So we should think
Okay,
in terms of network. So in terms of this dependency of uh, women to men and men to women.
Uh, Sir, I have two reasons. First one is the food thing which you pointed out. So maybe because women are experts at taking care of the family and themselves, so they can take care of themselves like nutrient wise. And second is because there is a common prospect that men don't cry and men don't feel anything. So that is why men cannot repent things in society, and hence they are like emotionally alone. And women can actually cry and talk about their loss in front of the
I think
society.
all the aspects that we are talking about, the physiology, the brain physiology, that how women are stable in terms of these shocks, or men are keeping the things inside, or I think we are not into a position to discuss those things. We do not have a sound basis that it might be the, so there are gender differences in the physiology and the way brain function, but I think let's not get into that. Let's talk about more materialistic thing, for example, more fundamental thing. For example, somebody pointed out that they can have their own food. They were not dependent for the healthcare on husband. Uh, what was woman looking for uh, when she got married? What is the fundamental thing that she has to worry about when a woman is getting married, given that the dependencies are different? The men are dependent for healthcare on women, at least in the present scenario. We think that this should change and these differences should disappear over time, the gender differences, as soon as possible, I would say. But what was woman looking for her life when she got married? Of course, let's not talk about emotions for the time being.
Financial support.
Yes, so that was spot on. The fundamental thing that woman is looking is that the financial security, right? Because more often, unfortunately, women are not into work. So they are looking for some good source of income, which is more stable. So once the husband is gone, what is happening to that support?
She has all the money for herself now, so she can take care of herself.
The bank balance is still there, although the husband has died. The all the fixed deposits, all the investments, all the bank balance is still intact, right? So if we think in that term, what were the dependency for husband and wife, then we have some level of explanation, some level of association with first is healthcare and second is the financial dependency. Now, of course, emotional reasons are there, the trauma is there. Whether or not women or men respond differently to traumas and the happy events like marriage, uh, I do not want to get into that because I do not have much knowledge on that. But there were some studies where people have shown that emotionally women are more stable. When people say that men doesn't cry and all that nonsense, is actually, this is based on my experience and little bit of reading, that casual reading, not in-depth reading. That's not true actually. So it's actually other way around based on my experience. Okay. All right. So I showed you this data. I can also give you some citations for this. This is again Christakis' work. What you see is that uh, the interactions, the contact, the close contact uh, are really relevant, and it actually determines your risk to death. It really determines your lifespan. So they are really having some purpose in life. And you can think of, why did we only talk about husband and wife? If there is a data for siblings, data for offspring and mother and all that, I think we will have some interesting finding there too, right? So, and why to look at only at these kind of bonds, which are very, very simple bonds, pairwise interactions. You might say that we started talking about complex network and then we are talking about a very simple network. That's because we had data. Now, you can talk about the complex network and then epidemic or whatever, pandemic, are very good example that this can really decide how you are living, right? So there wouldn't have been any epidemic, pandemic if there was no network, right? So if everybody quarantines himself or herself, they will COVID-19 will disappear in a week's time. Okay, so there was some simulation where people have shown that if we freeze the planet, okay, if you are sitting somewhere, you just be there. It turns out that 6 to 7 days, this pandemic will be over. But that doesn't happen. The dynamics and the network structure doesn't change. We have to interact with people. We are interacting with people for various reasons, and which gives rise to network routes for the virus. And we see that, mass level of casualties happening, and this is one of the worst pandemic that human civilization has seen. Okay, now I'll, how many of you play video games? Does anybody play a video game, addicted to video games? It may not be a craze these days, partly because you people are already occupied with your cell phones and YouTube and social networks and all that, WhatsApp. When I was growing up in my teenage, in the early 2000, people used to get addicted to a lot of video games, and some of those video games were online. And one of those video games, which were very popular at that time, I do not know how does it go these days, is World of Warfare, where you can take different avatars and there are different colonies, areas, geographical areas, simulated areas, and there are various kind of wars going on. Certain group of people, individual raid other places, and there are fights and so on. So in the year 2004 or 5, they did an experiment where they introduced a new player called Hakkar, and Hakkar was having poisonous blood, which was infectious. Okay, so it used to, if you get infected, you may get killed, and it can spread around. You have ability to transmit it further. Now, Hakkar did a raid in a particular isolated area in the game, and it was speculated that it will not spread because uh, people will kill Hakkar before it goes to a mass level. And it turns out that people couldn't, even before anybody could kill Hakkar, the poisonous blood spread around, and all the players were susceptible, but there were some animals in the game who were not susceptible, but they were working as carrier. All these things were not pre-thought. Okay, it was just that this is contagious, this blood is contagious, and if you end up fighting with Hakkar, this you will be having that blood, and if you interact with other, you may end up passing it on. And it turns out that within hours, everybody started dying in the game. So I'll show you a small documentary, news documentary on that.
computer game is providing us with a remarkable virtual view of what could happen if a real epidemic erupted across the globe. Characters in the world's most popular.
On September 13, 2005, patch 1.7 was released for the critically acclaimed World of Warcraft. This update included a new PvE encounter, Zul'Gurub. Located in the northern eastern portion of Stranglethorn Vale, a jungle zone, Zul'Gurub was a 20-man raid that provided challenges and rewards for high-level players. The challenges of the encounters, as is typical, were designed to be confined to the boundaries of the raid. The whole incident started with Zul'Gurub's end boss, Hakar the Soulflayer, one ability of which was Corrupted Blood, a debuff that drained a significant portions of players' health over time. Once a player contracted the debuff, it could be passed on to any characters in his proximity. The only way to cure the disease for all players affected was to kill Hakar. Corrupted Blood drained 200 to 300 health consistently. At the time, a typical max level player had 2 to 6k health, so eventually it was a serious problem for even high level players, and especially fatal for low level ones. The mechanic was designed to test the healing capabilities of the raiding team and the speed of how fast they can kill the boss. Once a player with the debuff exited the dungeon, the effect would be removed, covering the situation where players would want to run away instead of fight. Seemingly, all corner cases were accounted for. However, a loophole was missed. Unlike when players left the dungeon, when a hunter desummoned their pet that had the debuff and resummoned it outside, the debuff remained active. After the release of the raid, slowly but surely unsuspecting players were leaving the instance unaware of the fact that their pets were now infected. Still, the patient zeros of this fiasco wouldn't last too long. Corrupted Blood was too powerful for its own good, killing those affected in mere seconds, giving them little to no chance of infecting and spreading further. You see, in order for a disease to become an epidemic, its mortality rate needs to remain fairly low. Otherwise, it kills the host too fast before being able to transfer to others. In theory, Corrupted Blood would be a fatal disease that could kill low-level players within seconds and high-level players only a few seconds longer, so it was fairly unlikely to spread. However, what added a new variable to this equation was the non-player characters. Just like players and pets, vendors, guards, and any NPC could also contract the disease. But unlike players who would die too quickly before spreading it, NPCs couldn't die from it. Since they are an integral part of the gameplay of WoW, they could, and did, lure unsuspecting players to an untimely demise. So as more and more players got it, potentially running around in a panic, these NPC super spreaders were created, carrying a highly contagious disease but not showing any symptoms, remaining healthy enough to spread it without the populace knowing. All of this happened in a matter of hours. Hunters would summon their pets during a raid against a car. They both become debuffed with Corrupted Blood. Hunters desummon their pets in the middle of a fight, and the fight is over. While they no longer carry the disease, their pets still do. Not knowing this, they run straight to highly populated cities. Once they resummon their pets, the pets spread the disease to any characters around it. And once the NPCs contracted the disease, there would be no way to stop this as they wouldn't die. Innocent players just even walking by them would now contract the debuff, and either die or spread it further. The contagion spread at varying speeds on multiple servers and put everyone in a panic. The cities once populated with players were now filled with dead bodies everywhere. In the midst of the turmoil, some interesting behaviors began to be shown from the players. They began to take sides. Some tried to help on the front line. Certain high-level players that were able to keep themselves alive volunteered to try and help low-level players that contracted the debuff. While there was no way to cure the disease, their best effort was to keep them alive. Of course, while doing so, they would inadvertently contract the debuff as well. Then there were some who formed a group to set up a sort of quarantine zone for contracted players and warn others to avoid transmission. They also came up with some rough guidelines for contracted players, such as putting up warning signs so that non-contracted players will see and stay away from them. However, despite their good intentions, not everyone was willing to cooperate, and some even reveled in the chaos. While there were players who just did not take the situation seriously and ignored following certain player-created guidelines, there was a small subset that intentionally went out of their way to acquire the debuff and spread it to others just for fun. There were also players role-playing as doomsday preachers in the middle of the chaos, and also players who tried to profit from the incident by selling fake potions to others, claiming that it was a cure. Since there was no way to solve the problem within the game, the incident lasted until Blizzard had to step in and institute a hard reset on the servers. However, by that point, it had already become a legendary event heard across all gaming communities, and even to this date is remembered by many players as one of the craziest player-driven events in World of Warcraft. To the general gaming public, it would be remembered as such. However, the specific way the Corrupted Blood incident unfolded managed to draw the attention of those outside of the gaming industry as well. In the years following, epidemiologists have shown interest in the Corrupted Blood incident and even published studies on how it resembles real-life crises. In 2007, an epidemiologist physician, Randy Balser, published an article about the similarities between the WoW incident and the disease SARS. In the article, Dr. Balser suggested that multiplayer role-playing games such as WoW could serve as an advanced platform for modeling the dissemination of real-world infectious diseases. Following the release of the article, the Center for Disease Control even contacted Blizzard and requested statistics on the event to use in research on epidemics. But Blizzard responded saying they collected no info as it was just an unintended game bug. While it is debatable whether the responses and reactions of the corrupted blood incident can be used for a real-life scenario, there is a reason why some scientists take it seriously. It involves real people and not AI. It was an unplanned event where different people took different small actions that influenced the greater trajectory of the disease. In an article by PC Gamer, Dr. Lofgren compared the 2005 WoW event to the recent global health situation. Quote, corrupted blood was this unexpected black swan event, but nature is really good at getting people sick. If you think again in gaming terms, we're making saving throws against new emerging diseases all the time, and sometimes you fail. We have epidemics recur with some degree of frequency. The doctor likened this mindset of getting rid of seismologists who predict earthquakes just because we haven't had an earthquake in a while, but in reality, we know that they're inevitable. Lofgren goes on in the article to suggest playing video games at home to deal with the loneliness of social distancing. His personal recommendation? World of Warcraft. Perhaps the Zul'Gurub raid.
All right, so that was World of Warfare, and I think this game is still on. So I'll just show you. I opened that. Yeah, it's over here. It's still working. If some of you are interested, you can have a look at this page. All right, so what you saw was a virtual epidemic, because it was actually played by the players who were taking different avatars, right? Right. So it sounds familiar. This, whatever they were talking in this documentary, it really sounds familiar now, right? Because you have seen a live version. But unfortunately, we do not have a reset button to reset the whole thing. So they were able to reset their servers and restart the game. We can't do that. So all right, so I'm basically done for today, and in the next class we will take more specific example, some of them in biology, because the network science really has, of course, it has its applications across different disciplines, physics, sociology, but it became more popular in the field of biology. So I'll give you the reasoning why is that so, number one, and number two, I'll discuss from where did it all start, right? And then we will look at the more precise mathematical details of graph theory. So I'll stop now. If you have any question, we can discuss that.
Sir, I have a doubt.
Yeah.
Sir, how can we differentiate between mass hysteria and other mass events? Like, for example, if a girl is there on a bus stop and is beating some boy, then a crowd comes and beats that boys too with the mentality like, "Chhed hi raha hoga." So, like, is it a mass hysteria, and how can we differentiate between these things?
Okay, so if that event goes to a mass level where people start looking, in fact, I would say the mob lynching culture is an example of mass hysteria now, because it was happening repeatedly. And that's happening because people are following the herd mentality. कि अच्छा वहाँ पे ऐसा हुआ था, that fellow was beaten and killed, so that's the way, and police couldn't do anything because you have a crowd, you don't have a face. So they are doing it at multiple places. I'm sure you would have heard the news on mob lynching, and that's one of the bad side of it. If that events goes to a certain level, like riots, that's a different thing. But it is again example of what is called as collective behavior. Okay, and when you follow a challenge on social media, any challenge, various kind of challenge, eating something or within a minute, or how many bananas you can eat, various crazy kind of challenges are out there. That is known as fad, FAD. Okay, these are having a very short lifespan as compared to mass hysteria, and perhaps the riots also, which can carry on for days. So there are three things which are encapsulated within the framework of collective behavior: fads, mass hysteria, and riots. Okay, there could be others also. These are the ones that I recall. Uh, this is called as collective behavior, which is different from group behavior. Okay, group behavior is more of a long-term thing, how a community is behaving, okay, as a group. Mass hysteria is basically short-term thing. For example, that monkey man thing, which lasted maybe a week or so. Uh, Sometimes it can go to few months and again being repeated next year again. Some of the incidents, for example, this dancing mania was repeated multiple times over several years. Uh, Now, so the example that you gave can be considered as collective behavior. And in fact, I recall one such incident. I was coming on train from my home city Lucknow to Chandigarh, and there was a government exam on that day. So in the evening, all the trains were occupied by students. So when you have those exams, you know what is the situation in the railway station, and even the booked seats were occupied by those people. That, and if you argue with them, they could beat you. So I didn't argue with them. I was only trying to contact some police men around, but even police cannot do much. And I think you people are well informed how riots and these events occur, right? So these are collective behaviors, and the only way these are different from the group behavior is the lifespan, the time span, uh, till when this is kind of continuing. So these are basically short-term things, but can happen repeatedly. Group behavior is largely, for example, group behavior, you are having your friend circle in within IISER, you have different batches, maths, biology, and all that. Though that group is kind of long-term thing. So, and you will see that most of the group behavior examples are actually good. Most of the uh, collective behavior example can be good, but many of them are crazy and some of them are bad also, can be classified as riots. And since you have mentioned about this aspect, there is something called dark networks in the field of sociology, which is the network of underworld and criminals and all that. So let's not get into that. There's no end to this thing. We will end up converting this course to sociology course, but that's not the objective. We need to move on with the graph theory. Anybody else?
So,
Yeah.
so we can define mass hysteria as when a group of people do something without understanding the underlying cause. Is
It's
that true?
coming, yes, it's coming out of fear. This is, see, human brain has two angles. One is the emotional angle, which is having all kind of feelings, fear, anxiety, and spirituality also. The other angle is more of materialistic, more of logical, which includes your rationality, your reasoning, education, and all that, right? So more of scientific thing and more of artistic thing, and the emotional thing on the other hand. So this is more of this brain, which is which is dealing with the fear, emotions, and all that. So, so in fact, you will, if you search about this, you will find a lot of examples in factories where a lot of people are working together. That, you know, in one of the mass hysteric event, somebody complained of that there are bugs. So once you get those bugs, you will get vomiting and stomach ache and all that thing. And that became a hysterical event in the whole factory. This is one of the examples. There are many examples in the factories where laborers are working in large groups. And it turns out once you do the medical checkup, it turns out that some of them were actually having some health problem. Others were just feeling it, okay, out of fear and anxiety. So your body and brain respond in that way. So it is, of course, you may say that people not having proper education and understanding may lead to this, yes. But even educated people can behave sometimes very irrationally. And I think I don't need to guide you on that. Look around yourself, how some of the very educated people, scientists, maybe within IISER also, behave very irrationally. And sometimes that phenomena goes at a group level, right? So it is out there. And if you start looking at it, you will find a number of examples. So, of course, the origin is fear and anxiety. The propagating factor is the herd mentality. Okay, it will be started by one or few individuals, but then being followed by others. Okay, anybody else? So I only wanted to convey you the importance of networks. We are not going to study these phenomena. We will look at the mathematical framework. How do we study the networks in this course? Okay, if there is no more question, I'll stop here. Goodbye.
Thank you, sir.